going to rate this product on four criteria. Functional, in terms of functionality of a maintenance management system. Can it do what one needs it to do? Flexibility, okay, how flexible is it to work with? Practical, is it practical for your end user to work with? And is it configurable to your industry? In terms of functionality, Idus is a very functional application because it's very point and click driven. And it's got a graphical interface layer that sits on top of the asset layer, okay? And what the graphical component does is allows somebody, because we've heard so many times over the years, is maintainers will be like, you know what, I worked on that pump. I worked on this piece of equipment right here. How do I go and get there, right? Well, now, essentially, they can click on that pump and it'll bring them to that specific asset in Idus. Okay, and what that does is that saves time. It saves time in sitting down, figuring out what asset number that is, going over perhaps to another computer, logging into Idus, finding the piece of equipment. Now, with a click of a button, you're there, and a maintainer is ready to put in this information or look up the information that they need. Okay, so you can upload drawings, images, and it brings you directly to the asset information, making it a very functional application. Some of the components of Idus, it's a management tool for your asset records. Okay, so this is the fundamental layer of any maintenance management system, is populating with all your assets or your equipment. Okay, so it's a record of information. You can store make, model, serial number. There's up to, I think, off the top of my head, I think like 30 or 40 custom fields that can be populated, all configurable to the information that you need to put in there. You can create and route work orders to end users. You can schedule activities. You can manage your stock. You can do preventative and condition-based monitoring maintenance. Parts purchasing and costing directly from Idus. You can send out a PO. Okay, you can manage your inventory and whatnot. It has a fault reporting and routing module, which I find is unique. Instead of actually clicking on a piece of equipment, you can and generating a work order, you can just maintain a record of faults, what kind of faults they were, and then after looking at that fault log, gives you sort of the opportunity to go and create a work order based on that if you want. And then there's this sort of the maintenance package component. You can include documents, drawings, SOPs, sketches, anything you can scan in. Essentially, you can attach a link directly to a piece of equipment, which is an object or an asset, whatever you want to call it. It can be directly linked to a work order or a schedule. Report logs. So there's a reporting layer, which allows you to look at the history, do some analysis on your equipment, or do some analysis on the type of maintenance you're doing. And then the final component is the integration with iFIX. So the first layer that we talked about is the objects layer, or it's your asset registry. Okay, and this is, as I mentioned, the fundamental layer where all information gets held. Okay, it's developed in a structured hierarchy which you define. Okay, it's a very Windows Explorer tree-driven structure. You create the folders that you need. You name them how you want to name them, and you identify what type of information you're going to collect. Okay, now there's some fields in this graphic that are not available, but you can make them available, and you can name them whatever you want to name them, put them wherever you want to put them. And the great thing about this is when you add a piece of equipment, it actually forces you to organize your equipment in terms of class types. What a class type is you might have 5 pieces of equipment that are all a type pump. So it's going to ask you to create an asset class type, which is a pump. And then what that's going to do is it's going to sort of organize your equipment in class types for pumps, valves, meters, etc., instrumentation. And then there's a direct link to spares inventory right from the same screen. So you don't have to open up another module. You don't have to open up another application. Everything is directly linked on the same screen, so you can actually look at your spares inventory for this for that particular piece of equipment, making it a very functional and practical application. The work order layer is sort of the next layer on top that when people think of maintenance management systems, the first thing they think of is work orders, and that's fine because that's what a lot of systems get used for. And in your work order section, you define all your work order essentials: piece of equipment, when the work order got done, how many hours you think it's going to take, how long it took, who did it, what was the cause of it, what was the priority, and that sort of stuff. So all your work order essentials are defined in it. You can associate your materials list with your work order. So you can attach right on there to the same screen. And below I have an image of the screen here. Is what a person would look at is they would look at their work order number, and they have availability to go to the materials, look at links, and they include any additional information like documents, SOPs that you want them to follow in creating a piece of work. Right? There's a work order list which actually shows all the work orders that are specifically happening in that area that's been defined when you populate the tags or the assets. It identifies for you what kind of work plans there are. And again, I mentioned fault reports. If you can go to this tab here, you can look at your fault reports. How many people issued a fault report for this piece of equipment, right? And then you can go in and view their reports. So what you're doing is, a lot of people when they pull out a work order, there'll be 3 or 4 lines of what somebody wrote, but it'd be nice also to get history, some consistency of other people sort of through different shifts putting down their comments on how that piece of equipment operates, right? So very practical in that sense. The work order registration component is when a work order is complete, rather than just marking it as complete and signing off on it, Idus prompts the user to register the work order as complete. And what that means is that now the work order lifecycle information is captured, okay? And some of these tasks on the side that a user is going to be asked to put in, and that is configured if you want them to put in or if you don't. Observation, cause, improvement action, consequences of disorder, they're all customizable fields, okay? But what the driving idea here is that what was observed here to cause this piece of equipment? What was the observation that issued this work order? The fault reporting component. Now, an operator can now click on an asset either through a picture or go right directly down to the object level if they have the desire to do so. And rather than issuing a work order, they can what's called create a fault report. And this is essentially just tracking a record of faults. So if somebody's noticed that, oh, you know what, this pump keeps tripping out, right? Click on that asset, right-click, fault report, and make note whether it was electrical or mechanical or classified however they want, and just make note that it's been tripping out. And at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, whatever the sort of manager or the person in charge or however the hierarchy is structured wants to review those fault reports, they can look at the current faults, right? And from there, either directly issue a PM or a work order directly. The planning component. A maintenance management system obviously needs a planning component, right? So Idus has three options for planning. You can do time-based planning, which is essentially preventative maintenance. So as an example, every 6 months or every year, I'm going to maintain these 3 pumps because that's what the manual tells me to do, right? And regardless of the runtime hours on those pumps, I'm going to do it. The other one is value-based maintenance or condition-based maintenance. Now you can say, you know what, to those 3 pumps, I'm going to assign some condition-based maintenance criteria where if one of them exceeds 500 hours, then I'm going to trigger to spit out a work order and do a maintenance or some work on that piece of equipment. And the third one is a concept-driven maintenance schedule where it's scheduled shutdowns. A lot of people, depending on your industry, will have a Christmas shutdown, will have a summer shutdown. They may have a week where they're doing a tool changeover and they want to actually schedule some equipment for service. That can be all done in the scheduling and planning component layer, making it very flexible as a maintenance management system. And then as I briefly mentioned, there's the reporting layer. So the layer that sits on top of all this, which allows you to view your historical data. Okay, you can do reports on your object information. You can do accounting balances because Idus has, like we said, it has a purchasing and module. With every asset, you can assign a cost center. You can assign dollar value to the asset. You can assign how much money is in the cost center, and you can sort of manage your accounting balances. You can do a report versus reactive versus preventative maintenance, right? So there's a lot of opportunities for reporting in Idus. Again, just mentioning the graphical component to this application, which sort of one of the things which sort of makes it stand out from the rest is that it's direct access to assets. Okay, and that graphical component could be a photograph, could be a picture out of a picture out of a book, right, or a sketch, could be a drawing, could be something, could be an iFIX, or it could be any SCADA graphic, really, right? What that does is it allows people who are not very computer savvy, okay, to functionally put in information into the maintenance management system without spending a lot of time getting to where they need to get to. Because we find once they're there and they have the proper fields in front of them, there's no issue putting in the part number, the model number, what work was done, how many hours are booked. But the labor-intensive component is getting there and finding it, and that's where a lot of frustration lies. Out of the box, they have a mobility unit, so they can essentially, you can create a mobilized workforce with handheld clients. There's a messaging component, so you can get an email notification when a work order comes due, or have it automatically print out to a printer. There's the iFIX integration component, which briefly talked about. Okay, so from iFIX, somebody can initiate events such as to bring me directly to the asset, or right-clicking on this piece of equipment here. You know, I want to go right to the asset. I want to create a fault report. I want to generate a work order. I want to make a work plan, saying, you know what, in 2 weeks I want you to do some work on this. Or you just want to check the spares inventory, right? So it's very practical in the sense that you're skipping those steps in between from jumping from one application to another. And that's been a huge sort of question asked, at least in the years I've working with maintenance management systems, so especially people working in front of a SCADA system, is that, you know, I know work's got to get done on this piece of equipment. Why can't I just, it'd be great if I can at least see the asset numbers. Right now we're taking a step further. We're bringing you right to, from that piece of equipment to the asset. So also part of the Idus suite is not just a you know, in the box application and that's it. There's a data server component because obviously in most companies there are other applications such as third-party and ERP systems that would find this information very valuable. So another key functionality point is that there's a data server component that allows integration from the Idus information to other applications within corporations. So as a recap, Idus, in terms of functionality, it is a very functional maintenance management system. Absolutely. Everything is there in front of a user to use, to see, to touch, to enter data, to pull data off of. There's no hunting around looking for information. It's very flexible in the sense that if you don't like what information's there, it can be changed, it can be reconfigured. It's very practical because it's intuitive for the user. Everything's in front of the user. The graphical interface brings people where they need to be. The materials, the parts, the object information, it's all on the same screen. And the configuration component, it's very customizable to the industry because of its huge, the way it was developed allows any user to go in, or a predefined user to go in and customize the fields to make it usable for that specific industry. So it's functional, flexible, practical, and configurable. The fourth piece is that it's very cost competitive on all three levels. Okay, and what I mean by three levels is the capital costs for purchasing the maintenance management system, which was the first number that everybody sees and the first number they budget for. But then there's the integration costs. Okay, and that's not so much hidden. Okay, but it's also not so much talked about. It's an out-of-the-box component. Great, we got it. Let's get it integrated. There's a cost associated with that. And then there's the ongoing maintenance costs, which usually surface after the fact. So those three costs can be very intense when purchasing a maintenance management application. And I assure you that Idus is competitive on all three levels, just by the nature it was built, designed, and meant to go to market. Okay, and essentially the maintenance costs can be completely up to the user, because once the user customizes it for themselves, they can maintain it. So why Idus? Another big, strong component about this is it can be implemented in a week, not years. Okay, one view of all information, and it's graphically intuitive and easy to use. And the final slide, you know, if you allow us to come and meet with you for a 45-minute discussion, we'll just talk about your assets, we'll discuss what kind of maintenance strategy you have, and determine if Idus can be installed within your facility in 5 days or less, and you could be using functional data within that window.